evening. As always, we start with tzedakah to bring redemption, salvation, and goodness to the world. Tonight's class is going to be probably on the shorter side. We're going to do one short law and delve into it a little bit. So we're on the chapter 586, the Alter Rebbe's Code of Jewish Law, the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, the Dinei Shofar of Rosh Hashanah, the laws of the Shofar of Rosh Hashanah. This is the laws not of how to blow the shofar, as we said last time, but the laws of the physical horn itself. And we covered last time what kind of horn. That has to be the horn of an animal that its horn is a shofar. It's like a hollow tube, and it's not hollow. It's not like an air. It's not air inside it. Rather, there's marrow, but not. This is negating a horn that's solid, like a cow horn, like one solid piece. We said that specifically the best thing to use is the horn of a ram. Fine. Law number 3 is going to discuss the particular type of animal in regards to kosher and non-kosher. Let's see. Shofar mi behema tmea. The shofar, the horn of a non-kosher animal. Yesh leposle afilu b'diavad. It should be invalidated for use of the shofar even after the fact. What does that mean? So if you took the horn of what is a horn of a non-kosher animal? Give me an example. What animals have horns? Boar. A boar has horns. Horns? They have horns? Like horns on their head. A rhinoceros of sorts. Let's say a rhinoceros horn. You use a rhinoceros horn, you make a shofar out of it somehow, and you blow it on Rosh Hashanah. Even after the fact, you already done it, you have not fulfilled the obligation. It's not kosher for blowing shofar. Why? Because the only thing that is fit for, it's known as the work of heaven, doing Hashem's work, is only things that are kosher. Okay, that's the whole law. Now, the background behind this is actually quite fascinating. So, the background is along the lines of this. So, all of Jewish law is based on the Mishnah and the Talmud. Okay? The first step in the direction of a manual, I guess, if you will, of Jews, do this, do this, do this, was known as the Rif, Resh Yud, Final Fei, Yitzchak Alfasi. He took the Talmud, he cut out all the conversations. Now, the Talmud itself, if you try to rule on Jewish law straight from the Talmud, you'll be very, very lost, very, very confused, because there's not really such concrete direction on this. There's very little final say. It's many conversations and backs and forths and questions and responses. So the Rif, what he did was he took all the conversations, all the dialogue in the Talmud, and he cut it out, and he focused solely on what is the final say, what is the final law of the conversations, of the dialogues. So if you look through the book known as the Rif, it's printed in the back of most, I think, all Talmuds. It's almost like a copy and paste of the Talmud, but it's much, much shorter. Because again, it's the same thing more or less, but he took away all of the conversations, focusing strictly on what the final say is. Interestingly, so there's, on the Gemara, on the Talmud, if you look on the regular page of Talmud, on one side of the page you have Rashi's commentary. The other side of the page you have Tosfos' commentary. Okay, in the Rif you also have two sides of commentary. You have Rashi on one side; it's the same Rashi, more or less, basically, that's printed in the Talmud. And on the other side you have the commentary of the Ran, Resh Nun, Rabbeinu Nissim. Rabbeinu Nissim has a very fascinating commentary. So the Rabbeinu Nissim, the Ran, in his commentary on the tractate Rosh Hashanah, page 6, side 1, in the new printing of the Rif, he writes based on the conversation that's discussed in the Gemara in connection with it regarding what kind of horn is used, a hollow horn, a solid horn, and all that, the ram, and so on and so forth, what kind of horn is fit for use, he surmises from the conversation that it would appear that only a horn of a kosher animal may be used for the shofar. Okay, and he learns this also mainly from a piece of Talmud in Tractate Shabbos, page 28, side 2. Side 2. That there talks about tefillin. Tefillin are not made from plastic or paper or wood. They're made from hide. And we have a tradition from Moses dating back from Sinai, an oral tradition that if I'm not mistaken, that the hide that you make the tefillin out of has to be from something an animal that is kosher specifically. You can't use an animal that's not kosher. You can't use horse hide to make a tefillin. It's not kosher. It has to be a cow or sheep or whatever. So the Ran, he kind of pulls from that idea, although the Gemara over there is talking specifically about tefillin, he says maybe this would apply to the shofar as well, because he gives a sort of an indication from another piece of Talmud that shofar is called meleches shemayim. The way it's worded in the Gemara is regarding tefillin that's only the only thing that's fit for meleches shemayim, for the work of heaven, is something that is kosher. Okay, so shofar there's an indication that it's considered the work of heaven, and therefore seemingly it should only be from a kosher animal. However, the Ran ends off with a tzarich iyun, which means this needs further clarification. He's not decisive about it. He can go one way or the other. Okay, so there's room that maybe it's kosher, maybe it's not. Maybe it has to be a kosher animal, but maybe not necessarily. Going further in time a little bit, you have the work of the Tur. We spoke about it a couple of times. The Tur is kind of the first version of the Code of Jewish Law, and on the Tur you have the commentary of the Darkei Moshe, the Paths of Moses. The Darkei Moshe was written by the same Rabbi Moshe Isserlish, the Ramah, who has his comments on the Shulchan Aruch, on the Code of Jewish Law, who we follow as he's the Ashkenazi authority. So he has a commentary on the Tur known as the Darkei Moshe. Over there, the Ramah writes, he brings this discussion of the Ran. Maybe it should be only a kosher animal, maybe not. Seemingly yes, but we don't know. And he writes, being that there's this kind of doubt involved, he says, Toiv lahachmir. It's good to be strict. Doing a mitzvah, a biblical mitzvah, you do be strict, go on the stricter side, only use the horn of a kosher animal. In the Shulchan Aruch, when the Ramah writes his glosses, his notes on the Shulchan Aruch, there he says it a little differently. He just says, a horn of a non-kosher animal is puzzled, it's invalid for the shofar use. He says it doesn't say it's good to be strict. He says it's just factually, it's not kosher for it. So there's the commentary of the El Yazutta. The El Yazutta is a commentary on the Lavush. I'm not going to get into what the Lavush is. We're going to explain every single commentary, what we were bringing to this conversation. But the El Yazutta writes that the Ramah, he actually retracted from what he said in his commentary in the Torah, where he said that Toiv lahachmir, it's good to be strict. Meaning, you have a doubt, it's better to be strict. He retracted from that. It's not better to be strict. It's not a doubt. He says factually, the final law is it is not kosher. If it's not a kosher animal, a horn from a non-kosher animal, you can't use it. Done. End of story. Now, if you look in the words of the Alter Rebbe, you can see this whole conversation kind of like built into the words. It's very interesting. He says, "Shofar mi behema tmea," the shofar of a non-kosher animal, yesh leposloi. It should be invalid. Interesting way of writing it, based on this whole way that the Ran writes it, that it's a doubt. And he says, "Afilu b'di'evid." Even after the fact, you blew such a horn, it's still not. You didn't fulfill your obligation, like the Rama writes that it's not kosher at all. Why? Because the only thing that's fit for the work of heaven is kosher alone. Okay. God willing. Which time do we have? God willing, tomorrow, I think. I'm not going to go so much into it because it's not so practical. In theory, it can be practical, but it's practically not so practical. One of my favorite laws in the Code of Jewish Law. I like to talk about it. It just fascinates me. What is the law regarding one who blew a shofar that was served as a god, an idol worshipped shofar? Not a shofar that was used with idol worship. Rather, the shofar itself was served as an idol. Okay, God willing, tomorrow. Have a good night.